So Sean, if we can start off with your borough management update. I mean, really all we have is your update, and then we can all dive in to just looking at those responses from the capital budget. I did talk to Aaron, and we'll make a recommendation and then bring it to the table for consideration, and then give the office some time to noodle it over again in October. So we do have a large chunk of time for us to really sift through that after Sean's update.
Okay. And I'm going to give the condensed version of the borough manager's information. If you don't mind, I'm just going to get up. I got to close the door. I forgot to do that.
Yeah, go for it.
Sorry about that. There's three things in the update I want to go over, and one is the ongoing budget versus actual numbers in our age of COVID. Give you all a quick update on the audit of the borough's financial statements, and then a quick sentence or two about our operating budget update. So I'm going to go to share our screen, and I'm going to go to our budget versus actual report here that looks familiar to you. It's in the meeting package, but this one also has some extra columns in it that talks about how above or below we are going to be on projections. And I've highlighted rows that have changed since the last month we met and talked. And I'm scrolling through the income sides, and I'm going to pause real quick on business privilege tax and say we got some pretty big deposits since July 31. So as of August 31, we've collected almost 152,000 of our budgeted 160,000. So our previous short projection, which was creeping up, was 22%. Now that 22% number now is actually a heck of a lot lower. It's 5%, because we're projecting that we'll just be here at 152. We might get more deposits trickle in towards the end of the year. So this numbers has really improved from where I thought it was going to be 35% down when we started. And now it looks like this number here, and in fact, I'll just change it right now because it should say 5.
Sean, can I ask why you think there was a pretty significant increase in compliance with the business privilege tax? Did you do something different?
I can't comment on the compliance piece of it. I guess that's more of what we want to get into, looking under the covers of this revenue and where it's coming from and the reporting. So I don't have a detailed answer for you on that one, but I appreciate the question. But we seem to be zeroing in on our budgeted number for this year, even if we don't collect any more revenue. 5% down is not bad, and it's a heck of a lot better than 35% down, which is what we had originally thought we would be. All other incomes are okay, and we are way up on miscellaneous revenue. This has to do with some refunds that we're getting that are refunds to our health insurance, refunds that are coming back to us from general liability insurance. But the big one was checks from workers' compensation insurance that came back the borough's direction after an audit. It's just an audit is a normal process that happens at the end of every workers' comp annual cycle, and it looks at your experience, what you were charged, and it reconciles what you should have been charged for the prior year's workers' comp insurance. And then we just threw these checks into this miscellaneous revenue column because we didn't really have a good place to put them. In some cases, we are taking payments like this and booking them as revenue in expense accounts against expense accounts. That's getting really into the weeds, but I can talk more with anybody about why we do that and what expense accounts we do that with. Bottom line here is that BPT is way up. So in July, we were going to be down 68,000 on revenue. And as of August 31, we're looking to be down around 35,000. So that's a net $33,000 improvement. So that's good news. On the expense side, we are up on a few things, but they're very minor line items that I'm not going to spend I'm not going to spend any time talking about them unless you want to, because they're miscellaneous tax collector expenses and then miscellaneous under Public Works, and they're only just, our projections now are only going to be a little bit over in real dollars. So bottom line, our expense projection as of 8/31/2020 is that we're going to cut expenses in the borough by about $28,000. And as of July, when we did this analysis, we were at around $28,000. So nothing's really changed on the expense side. Good news is that projected income, this bottom line number here, Borough, if all of these assumptions are going to be correct, is going to come out in the black this year of $31,000. Keeping in mind that we budgeted to be in the black around $38,000. So if you want to really get into the weeds, we're about minus $7,000 from where we thought we would be as of the budget we approved last year. So this is good news. We're in the black. We'll be, if things hold steady, we will be adding to general fund balances by year's end and meeting these goals. So we'll continue to keep an eye on these numbers going forward. The two other things I want to quickly update everybody on, and then I'll be done, is that our audit of the borough's financial statements has been delayed by some back and forth with our new auditing firm. They've been requesting new information, and some of the questions they've posed to us have been stumpers. Meaning we didn't know exactly what they were asking for, and we finally got around to realizing we're going to need some outside assistance, similar to what we had been benefiting from with our relationship with the CPA we were working with last year. She's no longer available to us because she has a new job with the county, Montgomery County. However, we reached out to an accounting firm, and we're getting a proposal for services. If it stays on schedule, we should be getting that proposal tomorrow. And this would be the way we envision it is a quarterly relationship and an on-call relationship when we have questions that are kind of above our pay grade, so to speak, with financial know-how, person with a CPA background with a lot of municipal experience. We can ask them, hey, how should we be booking this kind of data, this kind of information? And then coming in on a quarterly basis and just keeping us on track, and also dedicating a little more time to the borough in the first quarter of years so that we can be prepared for the audit, so the audits can go a little more smoothly than they have during our tenure here in the management. So we should have that engagement figured out in the next few days. We have money in the budget to pay for it in the financial services line item, so it's not going to affect, or I'll make sure it doesn't affect our year-end projections for that number. But that is what we're doing, steps we're taking to address that situation. And lastly, our operating budget process is starting internally with weekly meetings with department heads. Our goal is to set some expectations with everyone internally about what we're doing, what our goals are, what things might be changing next year. I'll just let everybody know I was contacted by Lower Merion Township to explore the memorandum of understanding, which spells out the services that the Lower Merion Township provides through their police department to support Narberth Borough's police department. That includes, John could speak more intelligently about that, so I won't even try. But that's a line item in our budget of around $102,000, $105,000 in that range. So they've contacted us to renew that agreement, and we suspect there could be some additional costs we'll have to consider going forward. But that's a big, that's got our attention because it's a big line, it's a big number in our budget, and we'll be working with the township and with John and Andrea on that matter momentarily.
Sean, does that govern only the police, or does that also cover the fire department?
Just the police.
Okay.
And again, we will be, I think it was successful with the capital plan. I'm going to do it again with the operating budget in October, have a a public workshop where it's just me holding the meeting. Council members can attend. You all won't deliberate. It'll give it an opportunity for me to get all the information out at one throw, and we can do it ahead of a pending council meeting, so you have some time to digest and then go into deliberations when we meet next. So I don't know if that's going to be ahead of the workshop or ahead of the business meeting, but it will happen in October. And that's all I have. Thank you.
Thanks, Sean. Sorry, I'm trying to pull up the capital budget line items, but I sent you all the link to, and I apologize if it was confusing, the link to the results of those who commented. Aaron said he didn't really have anything to add to the form, and I didn't hear back from Bob, but 5 of us did complete this form. Just for kind of ask you, if please, to prioritize investments, to identify items that you believe should or could be removed at this time, any investments that should be added, and then any questions. So I don't know, maybe it's helpful if I just, Sean, if you want to give me permission to share my screen. I'm thinking that maybe we can just kind of talk through it. We were really kind of all on the same page. I was going to try to kind of create some emergent themes, but didn't really need to because we were already still there. So I spoke to Aaron and we thought that we can make some recommendations tonight. We can have a brief discussion at the big meeting and then, or at our full meeting rather, and then Sean can go back and bring a revised draft to the October workshop meeting, and then we can vote on it in the October business meeting. Sean, does that make sense to you?
Yeah, it works for me.
Fred, Mona, does that make sense?
Well, we want to make sure that we've got this done before we do the main, or the general fund budget, right? We can't really be debating both of them at the same time. So I think, yeah, if we get this, talk it over mostly during the workshop, and then we start talking over the general fund budget at the October business meeting, which is what you just proposed, right, Sean? That you would have this presentation either before the workshop or the general next month.
The operating workshop?
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't have a date set. It's either going to be in advance of one or both of those meetings.
Well, I think it probably should be the general, so we can sort of wrap up the capital fund hopefully at the workshop, and then start working on the general. I mean, just from a process point of view, does that make sense to you guys, Cindy, Mona? We don't want to have both of these, going at once.
I agree. Yeah, I think.
Yeah.
First.
Yeah, that sounds good.
All right. So yes, I affirm my support to try to have a more evolved draft of the capital plan by the workshop. That sounds good to me.
Okay. Okay, so let's review. I mean, is everybody comfortable? I know you've seen this, but perhaps maybe it's easier just to talk through. We can talk about some themes here. Prioritizing capital investments. The Narberth Bridge, it's interesting. I didn't put that to the end because I assumed this was a given, but I think it's important that we spell that out. Prioritizing, we saw stormwater and sewer systems as a top theme. We saw road paving programs as a top theme. And we saw critical infrastructure to municipal buildings, meaning safety or ADA as a top theme.
What was the first word? What was the word before ADA? I'm sorry.
Critical. Any type of critical updates.
Critical updates in ADA. Thank you.
Critical safety ADA to municipal-owned properties. I don't think there was anything. Bicycle and pedestrian infrastructure was in 4 out of the 5 priorities as well. And I'd like to actually circle back to that bike and pedestrian infrastructure when we're done just kind of reviewing this. Items that should be removed included pretty much anything besides that critical infrastructure safety ADA at Sabine. So the parking lots or anything, again, beyond what needs to do to be ADA or safety compliant.
Okay.
We did see the theme of police vehicles, except for the traffic controls vehicle, which I do believe there's a consensus that that would be an electric vehicle. Purchase as well. We see police equipment, including body cameras and equipment that is non-essential for any type of accreditation or certification item. Also see the theme of not spending the money on 201 Sabine, again, outside of those critical infrastructures until we have a plan moving forward. And public work vehicles, again, unless it's critical. Feel free to chime in here, everybody. Investments that should be added, specifically bike lane infrastructure, solid waste, again, electric vehicle infrastructure. We see the theme of bike and pedestrian infrastructure. And questions to be discussed at the table. Fred, I can let you speak to this because I actually kind of mirrored some of your comments, is this approach to when we are repaving roads, that we set a line item and a commitment that a road is only repaved when it goes through a complete streets evaluation and commitment.
So we've talked about this some in infrastructure, and I'm sure we'd be willing to go back into it. But I think the idea is that along with the repaving of the street, we need to look at the accessibility for pedestrians, mobility issues, and take a look and make sure that we don't have, broken sidewalks, that our curbs are ADA compliant, that we don't have other hazards sort of alongside the sidewalk. And it's sort of a mentality that just as we go through and we make sure to repave our streets, we also need to go through and make sure that we're maintaining our sidewalks and our facilities for other users, other transportation modes, that we're taking care of that as well. So I think it naturally, one way to do it is to fit it in with the road paving schedule. And now that we've agreed on a sort of an amount and a timeline for road paving, this would be a good opportunity to also incorporate a complete streets element. And I should point out that our comprehensive plan calls for a complete streets legislation. The the climate action plan that we're going to be looking at calls for complete streets legislation. So we already, we have a lot of things that are full of encouragement in that direction already, and we've committed to making these changes by adopting the comprehensive plan. So
a question for Sean and Matt. So I feel like my 16 years in the borough, we've just been doing whack-a-mole with streets. So while I like the approach of saying we're not going to repave a street until we go through a complete street, you're still just piecemealing it. What is the option of saying we're going to borrow money to be able to do it comprehensively across the borough? Because while I appreciate repaving one road at a time, so adding a bike lane in isolation doesn't feel safe to me, or it doesn't feel like a comprehensive approach. What if we make this commitment? Are there opportunities to leverage grants and borrowing dollars so we can really just apply the complete streets model throughout the borough?
Do you want to start on this one, Matt, first?
I have something to say if you want to gather your mind. I think that the complete streets model might work better for sort of smaller scale things. Sort of the model that I've outlined here is perhaps not suited to plan a whole bike lane route. I think bike lanes are an exception. I think you need to think about on a larger scale about how they're going to go, and they may not be suitable for this sort of small scale, one at a time thing. But certainly, I think curb ramps, I think broken sidewalk, I think, street lighting issues, crosswalk issues, all of that is something that can be addressed kind of on a street by street basis, which is more or less what I had in mind.
But Fred, to that point, I mean, the lighting we're doing borough-wide, or I think if we're coming out and doing curb ramps, is it fiscally prudent to do all of it? Would you get a better price if you're doing all your curb cuts or all your stormwater at one time versus bringing somebody in, every year to do one street?
Well, I guess the simple answer is yes, you do get a better price if you do all at once. However, that price is going to be astronomically high. And I don't know if there's going to be any funding available, both financing and grants, that will cover an entire borough-wide soup to nuts infrastructure redo. That's a massive amount of investment. While I appreciate the sentiment, I'm not confident that that would be feasible from a project management standpoint or from a financing standpoint. That would be a pretty big challenge to overcome.
Can I'd like to weigh in for a second. Cindy, I'm not in that consensus on the complete streets right now. I said I don't think we should work on bike infrastructure for the next year. I think we should put it off. I am absolutely in favor of complete streets and bike infrastructure and safer pedestrian and bike access in the long run. But I'm still looking at the fact that all of these people who are potentially facing evictions and what might happen to our property taxes next year. We did okay this year. I think the real problem is going to be the budget next year because of property taxes. So for me, I think we have to focus only on the essentials for this year. And for me, that's sewers, sanitary, and stormwater, because we can build as many things as we want to make the streets feel safe and livable for everyone. But if we're building them on a house of cards, that's a problem. And the storms are getting worse. We saw what happened with the stormwater drain that needs to be fixed. And I'm really concerned because our sewers are so old, and it has to be the priority. And I'm not interested in talking about complete streets till we know that what they're being built on top of is really safe. Like, I'm much more interested in looking and putting cameras down before we do any road paving, and putting cameras down to look at the sanitary and stormwater sewers to make sure that what we're building on top of is safe.
So I think, just to clarify, that came out as a priority, that everybody is on board, that sewers and stormwater are priority number one. But I guess the next question is, on the complete streets, I mean, stormwater is one of the major components of that. Yes. So you're addressing stormwater one block at a time, or are you addressing stormwater comprehensively in that complete streets model? So we keep saying bike lanes, but I think bike lanes is like one little fraction of that approach, but someone can correct me if I'm wrong. So, and Matt, I guess I'm saying, I don't, under the complete streets model, it's not that every single street is having some sort of intervention. It really is just kind of the downtown and the major thoroughfares. Is that accurate?
I would say that complete streets should be a function of any road segment in the borough that is in need of reinvestment. So whether that means the downtown business district, or whether that means a really poorly, a road that's in really poor shape in a residential neighborhood, the priority needs to be, how many vehicles, what is the population served, what other things, stormwater, sewer infrastructure that are existing on that segment, all adds into that decision-making model that then helps us say, okay, look, maybe a block worth of Haverford Ave is more worthwhile for reinvesting versus 3 blocks on the 400 block of Conway Avenue. right? There are 3 blocks of Conway Avenue. That's unfortunately, we're not at the point where we can have that level of decision making. And I'm loving this talk about infrastructure, and you're singing my song here. Thankfully, we have the first step of I look at it as 3 core models that we need in-house. First one is a road surface, the road repaving program, right? That was that presentation that I presented a few months ago. But that's the first step. The second step is we need really good information and data about our stormwater system. We need really good information about our sewer system, because as Mona, Fred, Cindy, you've all pointed out, those are the things that the borough is self-insuring. We have no insurance on those things. That if they break, we don't go and submit a claim to an insurance company. The borough is responsible for fixing these things, and unfortunately, we're at the point where our sewer and stormwater is reaching its useful life, and these are the things that I don't want it. I would much rather be proactive than reactive with these things. And so the 2 pieces of data that we're missing is a comprehensive stormwater system inventory that is geographically based, that we can then overlay with the road paving system. And we need the sewer system, same thing. And we've been talking to the borough engineer about how we can get that information and what that means and what it looks like and how we can use that for a decision-making model. And, unfortunately, that's not the sexy kind of stuff. It's not the show and tell. It's not the, hey, ribbon cutting of a brand new road. This is like the soup and nuts, the nuts and bolts of it, of getting that data that really we do need, that then it can be a sexy ribbon cutting at the end of the day. It might be a year or 2 away before we can get a comprehensive model for the borough, if that is making any sense.
No, I hear you, and I don't want to step onto Fred and infrastructure, but I guess the question and the frustration is then, do you need to come to F&A and say, and the office and say, we need a line item to do this, that this idea of this piecemealing by street isn't an option, and are we as a council then saying, what could those options be? Does it have to be borrowing funds, perhaps? Again.
So if you look in the capital fund budget, we do have money allocated. I talked with Sean about this. So we have money down the line for sewer replacement, gradual sewer replacement, starting not next year, but the year after, I think, right? So starting 2021, 2022, with the idea that we would have by then gotten our sewer census and done our stormwater and sewer census and be able to start replacing the segments that are in the most need. I think there's also some stormwater replacement in there too. So Sean has hopefully pulled it up.
But if we're talking about starting work on roads next year, and we're a year or 2 away from having a complete inventory of our sewers,
I agree with you that we
I
ought
would
to
not be wasting money by maybe paving roads that need to be repaved a year or 2 later. I don't know.
I agree that it does seem prudent to investigate. If we're planning to do a certain street, we should check underneath it first. I don't know if that's feasible just to do a quick checkup on one segment. We're really only talking about 1 year's worth of road paving, which is a few blocks.
And that's like $100,000 a year, right? That's what we talked about in council, was about $100,000 a year on the roads for repaving, isn't it? Right. Or am I wrong?
Yeah, that's I think that was like either a 20 or a 30 year. That was about a 20th or a 30th of the entire borough. The idea was that it would take 20 or 30 years of this to redo the borough.
Right.
So
I don't have the answer. When you get to the point where your sewers are as old as our sewers are, I don't know if there is a great answer. But I'm very wary of spending money on road repaving till we know what's going on underneath the roads we repave. As much as I know residents are upset about it. I know residents really want them repaved, but I don't want to waste the money or build or pave on top of areas that could, could have problems because of the sewers.
Well, I mean,
Yeah, Mona, I agree with
could
you
do-
wholeheartedly. Hold on, Fred. Do we agree then, however, that we would say we would not allocate money into road paving until there's a stormwater sewer assessment? I mean, is that the consensus of recommendation of FNA? I don't quite understand the issue of the road paving. I think it's some of our best and cheapest traffic calming right now when there's some disruption in the paving, and it serves as kind of the de facto traffic calming.
That's a good point.
So I'm quite comfortable with that little bit of an inconvenience. And I'm just thinking, if we have to move to recommendations, are we in consensus of saying that we would not distribute, or we would not vote for releasing paving funds until there's a sewer stormwater assessment, and whatever that year or two is?
I believe that we could do a spot check, right? I mean, that we could just, if we pick an area that we want to pave, we can just put some cameras down in that small segment, if that's reasonable. Is that reasonable, Sean, Matt? Just to do a quick check of an area before we, before we did a paving project?
Yeah, you can do that. Unfortunately, it doesn't give you the holistic view of what's upstream and what's downstream. And so that's the part of the decision-making matrix that we don't have. We don't have that analysis available to say, okay, we have all of the network now mapped. Let's do a network analysis and say, okay, what are the pipe diameters? The pipes might be in a really good condition along that segment. We might recommend, based upon the scoping of that pipe, they look fine. Go ahead and repave the road. But if we do a holistic analysis and we realize that those pipes are undersized on that block, then we're going to have to dig it up and increase the volume to help upstream, if that makes any sense.
It does. I mean, I was thinking we could do both, but so you're saying if we do a repaving before we do this holistic analysis, we're running the risk of having to, tear it up and redo it. So
as is always the case with fresh repaving, we've got Aqua and Pico that'll come in and rip it up anyway and not tell us about it. So that happens, right? It's a brand new, freshly paved road, and it never fails. Within a month, Pico or Aqua will come up and dig a fresh hole in the road and screw it up anyway. So, when utilities are located in the road, you're always going to get somebody digging in the road.
Well, I really like what Cindy proposed. I hadn't thought of that. It is a great traffic calming measure in the near run. I think there, obviously, like any other spending, I would say if there are any essential areas where roads are unsafe or where sidewalks are unsafe, I would absolutely, or inaccessible, I would support fixing those just in the meantime. But and I'm happy to take all the angry resident emails myself, and I'm happy to not get reelected because everyone's angry that their roads aren't paved. But I really, to me, I feel that strongly about it. So I would say we fix the things that are essential, but leave the rest till we can get a really good inventory done. Excuse me.
Mm-hmm.
And I think, and Mona, I'm sorry, just to finish up on that, to reiterate or to support what you're saying, Mona, is that we have data now that tells us that our roads really aren't that in that bad of shape. They might look unsightly, right? But structurally, there's only one segment that was ranked highest in the privatization. So you have that data to use also to as cover and a basis for your hypothesis.
Okay.
Sean, you had a comment?
Yeah, I think it was to an earlier point that was being made that we're working towards a more streamlined decision-making model where conversations like this will be more focused on, will be easier and more focused on, more solution-oriented and more prescriptive about what we should do with funding and what we can do, and it'll be easier as time goes on. But we're not going to invent these inventories and knowledge overnight, and we're not going to learn how to integrate all of these things overnight. I'm recommended, and the reason I put some money in the paving program right away is that I feel like we can look at the system and understand the risks, understand the motivations, understand the big picture of, from a comprehensive plan perspective, what the goal of infrastructure renewal is and what a huge role our streets play in that, and come up with an implementable project in the 10 to 12 month time frame. And when we are back again talking about capital planning around this time next year, or maybe a few months sooner, we'll have better information, and it may not, our decision-making model may not be fully hatched yet, but we'll be further down the road if we're able to dedicate some of our resources internally to acquiring this information, fact-checking it, and that's going to have costs in terms of time and money that we'll bake into the budget. And the time cost is something we should talk about too, because this gets back to the conversation about what are the administrative priorities. If we work on one thing over on the left-hand side, that thing that we know is a council priority, but it's on the right-hand side, has to wait until we have resources to dedicate to that. And if we're not satisfactorily meeting expectations, then we have to have a conversation about, well, we either have to change the expectations or we have to change the amount of resources we have to apply to the solutions. So that's my long-winded way of saying is I think we can do something in this sort of agile decision-making environment we're in right now, knowing that in another year and by 2 years for sure, we'll be in a much better place to have a more linear decision-making model that it makes sense and anyone can understand.
Sean, I also just think, until we have the parking study task force and recommendation from that group, I'd be hesitant to repave any road and thinking that the configuration may change as a result from the data that we glean from that committee and process as well.
I mean, we're talking about paving next spring or next summer, right? That's the paving season is like late spring or summer. So we should have the parking recommendations and we should have our own parking decisions made by then. So Mona, I guess my concern is that, I think, street repaving is a essential part of governance, and I think we can minimize the chance that we're going to have to tear it up and repave it in the future. I think that we should be able to identify a segment where our spot research indicates that the sewers and stormwater is in good shape, is my sense. I mean, it sounds like there's always a possibility that the full analysis will change that, but I'm not sure how high that possibility is.
So let's bring that back to the full council, because I would be comfortable with no paving funds are relinquished until there's a stormwater assessment with a caveat of safety or ADA. Fred, I hear your point too. Because this was identified as a priority, or on all 5 of us who responded, I'm going to suggest that we take it to the larger table as well, just to get everybody's feedback.
All right.
Does that make sense? I asked because everyone did come to consensus to say that aside from the parking enforcement officer with an electric vehicle, replacement vehicle, public works and police vehicles were put on items that should be taken off. So we have asked both Ed Harmon and Chief Gallagher to submit just written kind of updates and reports on those vehicles so we can all take a look at that before we vote, and that can inform Sean's second draft of the budget. I did want to suggest one suggestion and one question. The first comes from a conversation that I've had with Rob in Public Health and Safety, and then again with Sean, and that would be adding an additional category at the expenditures by category, and you should all be able to see my screen now, hopefully. And And you can see here under public works, we have infrastructure, we have paving and highway. Under public safety, we have both a fire and a police line. And I'd like to suggest that we make an additional public safety category and call it infrastructure. And while it really just, I think, reflects kind of our philosophy of a holistic public health and safety approach to borough management, I think it's important for us to consider things like bike lanes, things like curb cutouts, right? Or stormwater drains, to have its own line to acknowledge that probably some of the most critical safety issues in our borough, in fact, can be managed or addressed via the built environment, and using environmental design very strategically as a function of public safety. And I would suggest then that it therefore kind of begs its own expenditure by category line. Thoughts?
Do you want to call it complete streets, or is that I mean, I'm trying to. I think if somebody is looking at it, and they may not immediately know what that line item would mean. Is my only concern. I agree that it's important. I think there needs to be spending in that category. So I agree with your larger point that we need to start allocating. Call it
complete streets. Yeah.
Okay.
Maybe environmental design. Environmental design and infrastructure.
Sure, that sounds fine.
Mona?
Yeah, that's fine with me. I agree. Can I ask a quick question about a prior subject? Or no?
Sure.
I agree with that. Wait, is the parking controller vehicle? Because I had recommended no new vehicles. Is that just, is it broken? We can't fix it for one more year, hold off for one more year on it? I mean, I would like to see it replaced with an electric vehicle too, but is there any way we can hold off for a year on that? Is it being towed more than it's operating?
I'll let Sean or Matt answer. I believe it's damn near unsalvageable.
Okay.
I think that
I can weigh in. I can weigh in for you, Mona, if you'd like.
Yes, please, Chief.
Yeah, thank you. So 3690 is our parking enforcement vehicle, and right now it has about 46,000 miles on it. It is a gas guzzler. It's an 8-cylinder vehicle. It's a 2004 Chevy Impala. If any vehicle probably needs to be replaced, it's between that one and 3699, which is our SUV and one of our older vehicles, but takes the most beating. As an EV option, I would say the parking enforcement vehicle is our first choice. If we have to replace one or the other, I'd say the parking enforcement vehicle should go first. It's just it's run its course. I can tell you that, just based on age and some idle time. Even though it's only got 46,000 miles, when we take it over to Pat's Auto Repair, based on the invoices that we've had since I've been here for the past 2.5 years, it requires quite a bit of work at different times. Is there a possibility we could hold off on replacing any vehicle into the next capital improvement plan year? Yeah, I certainly think there is. However, the way we had it mapped out on the CIP as proposed, we wanted to replace 3690 with a EV vehicle for parking enforcement, and then we wanted to look at the option of replacing 3699, our marked SUV, on next year's capital improvement plan section, because by that time that is going to be approaching about 100,000 miles, and it's falling apart now. To Cindy's point, I can break this down on a report where everybody on the committee has a better understanding of our entire fleet and exactly what we're looking at in terms of mileage and some other concerns.
Thanks, Chief.
Thank you. Sorry.
Oh, go ahead, Mom. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I'd love to see how much we spent on maintenance for the car last. Listen, I drive a 2008 with well over 100,000 miles on it. So I'm not saying we shouldn't replace the vehicles. I am in favor of updating and upgrading, but I just again, I'm trying to think about what's going to happen next year, and if we could keep it going for one more year before we replace it with some kind of electric vehicle. Maybe the electric vehicles will be cheaper. But again, I'm someone who drives a 2008 with, I don't know what it is now, 130. I don't know how many miles it has on it.
Mona, I agree.
Um,
Listen, I'm someone who keeps their cars too. I have a Nissan Altima that has about 160,000 miles on it, and it's a 2007. And I just got rid of a 2008 Ford Expedition that was a 2008, and that had about 167,000 miles on it. So I try to keep my cars as long as I possibly can. There is no doubt that the fleet that we currently own is the most affordable one that we'll have in the future. Because we own it. But I will say this though. Some of these vehicles, and I can pull the invoices and give you a summary on that report. Some of these vehicles are incurring quite a bit of repair costs. Now, we have a preventive maintenance schedule that we do for our entire fleet, 5 vehicles, and I keep them on point. Myself and the officers do a great job. If you notice our fleet, rarely are any of our vehicles down. We have, they're always operable. They're clean. They're filled with gas. We have brought this fleet, into a 180 direction. When I first got here, that we only had 1 car out of 5 that was operable. And now we have all 5 that are fully functional and professionally and professional in appearance.
Great. Thank you. So, Chief, if you can get us that review, and Ed Harmon's going to do that too, then everybody in council can take a look at that.
Sure.
Prior to the October. Thank you. So, okay, back to, I'm sorry, would F&A recommend that we add a 3rd line category of public safety? Matt, I'm actually curious, just because Sean and I talked about this, I'm curious your opinion on that.
Yeah,
I
think that's good. I think I like the idea of it being specific enough and defined enough. I like the fact that it would be out in front of everybody instead of buried within one of the existing. I like it.
Okay, so if we could bring that to the table for discussion, that begs, I know, my next question, Sean, which is something that we talked about when I was in public safety of Gigi as the chair, and I'm quite honestly, I'm not sure if public health and safety has had this conversation yet under Rob's leadership, but the question of our fire house and the amount of donations that we make to surrounding boroughs, and that we do not collect any funds to support our own firehouse like equivalent municipalities. That is there an option to review that, in which case that would it would decrease spending on our Narberth Fire Company?
Well, there's a couple things there that are very important, and we have a meeting set up with the fire chief and deputy fire chief to go over 2 things: the capital spending requirements for the fire company. That's everything the fire company spends on that's durable and lasts more than a year and costs more than $2,500. What does that look like on an annualized basis? We still haven't gotten that information from the fire company. That's my goal, to work with them on that. And then on the operations side, we have a larger issue in terms that goes back a very long time that we need to reconcile with. And our first step is really going to be to sit down with the chief and try and understand the history of the relationship of the Narberth Fire Company with Lower Merion Township, and to put some quantifiable data on the numbers of calls that the company responds to in the township. And then to try and align that with the financial support that the township provides the other 6 fire companies that serve township residents. We need to start that conversation. That conversation's overdue. We need to listen. We need to understand why we are in the position we are in now and what contributed to the current state of affairs. And we need to continue to provide for fire service responses in the borough and in the township service area. Very important conversations are going to be happening in the next few months with the chief and deputy chief of the fire company. So I'll have more to say about that at a future date. But yeah, you're absolutely right. There is an unknown long-term capital requirement to pay for the renewal of firefighting equipment. There is an annual operating expense baked into our facilities and into the salaries we pay our two full-time firefighters, the workers' compensation insurance we pay, fire hydrant rental. All these things contribute to fire protection services that we provide to a very large population, and it's very important, very critical service that we provide, and a public good.
Is that something that you were reviewing as part of public health and safety?
I don't know which committee it's plugging into. However, since it's a financial and a public safety matter, it probably goes in both places. Okay.
I'll talk with Rob and Aaron and see where because somebody should probably be the lead on that, so you're not bouncing around to different committees.
Yeah. Well, we are going to. Matt and I are forging ahead behind the scenes with leadership of the fire company on our fact finding, and then we'll continue to do that. We want to investigate it and see if we can realign that relationship that the fire company has with the township and that the fire company has with the borough to make more rational financial sense. Really, is all we're talking about.
Okay, Mona, I'm sorry. Were you going to say something?
Oh, I was just going to say we haven't had that conversation in public health and safety this year because there's been so much else going on. So we haven't done it since January. So I guess, yeah, that would be a conversation with you and Rob.
What's been going on public health wise in 2020?
Okay, so if I can just summarize what I'll report back at our meeting at 7:30, and then I just want to move on because Mona, I don't want to drop the business privilege tax process. That's on the back burner right now, but I'd ask, could we get a timeline for when we can finish that process? So we are going to bring a question to the larger table of this idea of sewer and stormwater assessment. We all said that was a priority, but then how do we relinquish funds for repaving? Is it we're not going to repave, give any funds to repaving until that assessment is done, versus, Fred, your opinion, if we can kind of do spot checks to address that issue so that we can bring to the large table. We'll share that all of us, the 5 that responded, felt that aside from potentially the parking enforcement officer's car, that we want to wait on vehicles if it is not critical. And we will be anticipating an explanation in writing both from Public Works and police to get some more details on that. And that may inform our position on that. We will we'll look into, I think this fire reimbursement has some pretty significant fiscal consequences. So while that's not something we need to vote on, we can talk about should PHS or FNA kind of take the lead on that. We did all agree that no municipal buildings or properties should be invested in other than critical safety or ADA investments. Does that kind of accurately review? We would suggest that there be an additional public safety item that includes some sort of environmental design or infrastructure.
Yeah, that should be funded alongside the road repaving. That should have an annual budget alongside the road repaving budget. I'm not sure what the right number is. Thinking maybe $30,000 or $40,000 a year, but that's my thought. And I don't know what really is going to be an appropriate number for that to handle sort of the scale of stuff that would go along with $100,000 worth of road repaving. I have seen places that say they allocate about 25% of their transportation budget to sort of non-automobile work, and then 75% to automobile work. So that's about what it would work out to be if you put in 33 and 100. Other places do more, other places do less. So.
Yeah, I would argue that that shade tree, which I can't find that, but should be under public safety, environmental design, and infrastructure.
I would agree.
Michelle Kondo, our very own neighbor, Michelle Kondo, actually does research that shows how trees actually reduce gun violence. So we could.
Those are great papers. Everybody should read those papers.
I actually totally agree with you. And we have the data and the science to suggest that trees are a pretty important public safety tool. So, okay, so then I'm accurately representing the conversation here at the table. Okay, in the last couple of minutes, can we talk the business privilege tax on just what a realistic timeline is on addressing this? I was curious why we had such compliance this year, because you'd have to think if there was any year that businesses were going to be unable to pay their taxes in full and on time, it's conceivably at this moment. So I'll turn this over to Mona and Sean, just to review what a realistic timeline for this process may be.
So I've been waiting to find out when council, I know in a long discussion that Sean and I have, we had talked about how council would need to make that a priority, because you can't, we have to prioritize for the staff what we want them working on. But I don't know when that process takes place. I know part of it is through the capital plan, but that's not a capital plan issue. Part of it is through our discussion of the general fund, but I don't know when something like, when would we hold a meeting where something like business privilege tax would be discussed by council? Should we make it, where should we put it in the priorities?
I think, I don't want to speak for Bob Weisbord, but he and I had a phone conversation today about this issue. So I think there might be good to connect with him about when he intends to, when he thinks it might be a good idea to propose to council, because he was thinking along the same lines, like how do we sit down and talk about what things on the council priority list of, I don't know how many there were total, maybe 24, 25, something like that, items, which ones rise to the top, which ones can wait. And then going along what I was saying before, if we get in a position where I'm looking at resources, financial and staff time to get something completed, we may very well be having a conversation about, like, is it more important to for us to concentrate on the taking our sketch ideas about what we know needs to happen with business privilege and turning it into an action plan, things that we're going to do and accomplish with timelines, guidelines, assigning work to be done, as opposed to things that have to wait.
I'm not sure how much of a discussion there's going to be at council beyond a prioritization. I mean, I think council we know what kind of could be done, and we just need to figure out where we're going to put it on the priority list for borough staff to do it. It's not something for us to do. It's something for the borough staff to do, and we just need to decide what priority it is to do it, rather than sort of debating the issue. It's debating the priority of the issue. Does that make sense?
Right. That's what I mean. Is there a meeting once a year, or is this done? Like, how is that? So, I mean, I can follow up with Bob after this meeting, but is there, I wasn't here the last time council set priorities. Like, if you go in that priorities spreadsheet, it's like priorities are set with like a 1 or a high priority or so I don't know when that was done. So I don't know. but I can talk with Bob about when we would do something like that again, because this falls outside of the capital fund, so I don't.
And
Yeah. Although,
any project that's on that priority list, whether it's business privilege or any of the others, like where does it fit in our priority list? Because I'm going to then I can look at that and say, okay, well, anything below number 16 can wait until number 1 through 15 are substantially on their way and launched, and I can keep an eye on resources allocated to getting those things done. And also, if we may find ourselves talking about, we have operating budget coming up. We should have this conversation soon, because if the conversation might have to change to, if it's not getting done fast enough, if there's not enough getting forced through the pipe, then I can identify resources that we'll need to bring in. More consultant dollars, more engineering fees. There's people at Pannoni who can help us out with all sorts of things that are on that list, all the way up to additional staff to hire to manage types of projects, or manage things that your staff who can manage these projects don't have enough time to do because they're spending a lot of time on really, bookkeeping, for instance, is a task that eats up some of my time. So I'm all for this conversation, because I think it'll help us understand what's important and what our capacity is, and it'll give us an opportunity to tell you all, like, okay, we can get A through J done, but KLM and N might have to wait, and we'll keep it living, and it'll be in the next cycle around. And I thought that I've been also thinking strategically about what parts of our work are cyclical. We do the operating budget every time of year, and we do it in a similar kind of way. That's a cyclical process. We can start mapping out with our committee meeting structure what sorts of things should be talked about and where our touch points should be. So we can almost kind of pre-create a lot of the framework of agendas and thinking about work. And I always thought January would be a great time for kind of like a state of the borough cycle for committee, for council to say, okay, let's take stock of what happened the year before, what went well, what didn't go well, what did we get done, what didn't get done, and what's a priority and what's not a priority, and kind of like set that up. January is a great time to talk about, like, hey, what are we going to resolve to accomplish this year? So I think there should be an expectation, Mona, where you would know ahead of time where to have that, when that conversation is happening, and so would everybody else on council.
Okay. And just one thing though, like I think I'm thinking about income, and of course, obviously I've mentioned I'm worried about next year's budget and if this could be a potential extra source of income. And I'm wondering, and I know that there's a huge amount of infrastructure that would need to be put in place if we want to start doing the business privilege tax ourselves, and that's a long-term project. But could we maybe, in the emails, I'm happy to draft something, like just start putting in every single email kind of at the top or very near the top, just a reminder for people that if they are self-employed working in the borough, that they should fill out the business privilege tax form, and that and because a lot of new people are moving in, as people move out of New York City or move out of Philadelphia, new people are moving in, and I think that might be just a way to grab some people who aren't even aware that there is a business privilege tax here. I know, yeah, that's what I'm thinking, because I think a lot of people just aren't even aware of it and would pay it if they knew.
Do we have on the email on our website a business tab and for business owners?
There is, yeah, there is. But I'm thinking of something maybe we push out too, but I don't.
Okay. If I can just go back, I'm sorry, to talk about the list of priorities. I think that's, I think it's a helpful tool to keep us somewhat on target, but things are not static. I mean, stormwater and sewer were on my radar, but not until half of Conway blew up after the last storm. And suddenly, I may have ranked out of 5 and it's now my +1. So I don't think we can be married to that priority list. Additionally, to the point about the business privilege check, we knew it needed to get done. And then COVID hit and we're about to, go into we're in this incredible recession. So I'm not sure that we can rely on that as anything other than a really living document that needs to be reactive. Like Sean and Matt, I would hate to say, the business privilege tax was voted a 1 and sewer was 3. So let Conway sit on that back burner until you're done the business privilege tax. Like we can't operate like that.
Yeah.
So I do think that can't be a conversation that just Bob has, that we kind of maybe need to all reaffirm that process as a council.
Yeah, and just so the public who might be listening to this knows, if we ever have an emergency situation where something is damaged and we're worried about public safety, we're not going to wait to fix it. It's taken a little bit longer on Foreign and Conway because we discovered a piece of infrastructure we didn't even know existed before the storm. So it's kind of a blessing that slowed things down. But I won't get into the weeds on all the details of that.
Sure. Okay. Well, that's all I have then. That's all we have on the meeting today. Items for the next business is scheduled bills, but I don't have anything else. I don't think we have anyone from the public in here.
No.
Mm-mm.
Hey, I just want to say thank you for organizing the feedback about the capital plan. It's very helpful. This is what kind of the dialogue I'm very excited about to talk with you about and set priorities and make sure that after we go through this plan that it resembles your feedback and your goals. So thank you for I think everybody here on the committee contributed their direct thoughts, and Cindy, thank you for organizing it.
Oh, no problem, Sean. It was better than multiple emails. It was about efficiency. So thanks everybody for your patience with giving you permission and stuff. Okay, then if that's all we have, we can end now and then we'll have 20 minutes to stretch before the next marathon meeting.
Sounds good. I'll go run around the block.
Yeah, that's what my daughter does.
See you, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye, thank you.